Over 23 million early votes have been cast so far. But after the FBI announced that they're resuming the investigation into Hillary's emails, the searches on Google for how to change your early vote, they have skyrocketed. And this really brings up an interesting question, I think, about whether it's actually a disservice to people voting early before all the information's on the table. With me now to discuss is Democratic strategist and partner at Caldwell Strategic Consulting, Stephanie Mickle. Stephanie, good to see you.
Good to see you too, Liz.
All right, Stephanie, let me ask you about the early voting, because 23 million is a lot of Americans. That's certainly a pretty large number here. In your opinion, is it a disservice to the overall electorate for all these people to be voting before we have all the information on the table?
No, not at all. There's all sorts of reasons for early voting, practicality, convenience to the voter, and so forth. And so for many people, early voting is an absolute necessity because they're able to work it into their weekends. And while there may be a lot of interest in what is necessary for an individual to be able to change their vote after they've cast a ballot, I noticed you mentioned 23 million searches. I don't think it's likely that people will actually go and do it. At least not 23 million people will go and do it, just because their reasons for voting early have a lot to do with lifestyle preference.
Right. And I would never suggest to do away with absentee ballots at all. Of course, that's a way of making sure that everyone has access to their right to vote, and I certainly support that. But it does seem to me that there's some buyer's remorse sometimes when people vote so early that new things come out, because we've seen this entire month of October, from the beginning with the Trump tapes to the WikiLeaks and the James O'Keefe videos, then to this FBI investigation, and any more October surprises that are yet to come the rest of this week and early next week. People might not know everything that's going on, especially people who aren't as keyed into the whole process as you and me, Stephanie. But there are 6 states across the country where you actually can change your early vote. You can cast your vote and then you can change it. Some of them include swing states: Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, New York, and Louisiana. You can change your vote.
I know, isn't that something? Well, I think, yes, there have been loads of surprises this month, far more than I think any of us could have anticipated. But I also think that a lot of people have already made up their mind, and in spite of the surprises, and the surprises, I think, make for good television, great coffee conversation
TV entertainment,
us and that sort of thing. But I don't see too many people changing their minds at this point. That doesn't say anything about the undecided voters, but I don't even know who could possibly be undecided at this point. They might not be happy, but undecided, maybe not so much. But yeah, there's swing states that are affected, as well as some other states that are not likely to be seen as swing states that have the option to change your vote. And I respect their rights to do that. I mean, if they want to make it possible for a voter to change their mind, again, I don't think that too many will, but it's a nice feature to have.
Right. It complicates the system a little bit. And I think you're right. I actually saw a poll a day or so ago that said 86% of voters are already know who they're going to vote for sure. They are certain about who they're going to vote for. But Stephanie, given this FBI investigation that's recently been opened, and I actually would agree with you on the James O'Keefe videos and the Trump tapes, I'm not sure that they changed too many people's minds. But reopening this FBI investigation, does this change anybody's mind? Not just flipping and flopping from voting for Hillary and then Trump, or vice versa. Does this motivate anybody who would have otherwise stayed home to go out and vote, or cause anybody who was planning to vote to stay home?
Well, I think it's possible that the initial scenario that you mentioned could happen. People who may have sat on the sidelines may feel that this announcement by the FBI director is just the nudge that they need to go ahead and cast their ballot. I don't think it will motivate, because I think the people who are going to stay home are going to stay home. But I do think that the former scenario is a distinct possibility.
Right, because human nature is human nature. If you haven't decided by now, I don't know what would make you decide. Stephanie, let me ask you about this FBI investigation, particularly one part of it, not just the investigation itself, not just Hillary Clinton emails. We all know the story there. But let me ask you about liberals and media attacking James Comey, FBI director, attacking him for reopening this investigation now, even though he said that he just got this information last week. And this comes after they praised him in July and attacked Republicans for attacking him. Is there some kind of double standard that you see there?
So I want to make a distinction between the media and liberals because I don't think they're the same. I think that, and I say this as a Democratic strategist, I do think that there's a lot of consternation, rightfully so, about the way that the announcement was handled. Especially, it seemed to be to me that he jumped the gun a little bit, not having looked at the actual emails before making such an announcement, and knowing the type of impact that it might have. But I do think that the media's coverage of this entire election has been robust, and all sorts of stories and side stories and that sort of thing have been covered. So I don't know that I would say that the media per se is criticized, but I mean I acknowledge that liberals have certainly
Right.
criticized the decision, as has and the GOP criticized the decision when he made the announcement in July. It actually speaks to a bigger point, though, about whether or not they should be making such announcements at all. There is certainly a school of thought in law enforcement that says that you really kind of keep quiet about investigations until you're very sure about what you want to do next. And so, and I think that, that
Right.
is the more conservative, more judicious approach.
Right, and I understand that because it is a philosophy, a law enforcement philosophy, I think, that you don't want to impact the investigation itself by having
Right.
people hear about it from reports rather than hearing the information itself. But in this case, I personally don't know what else what else we would expect Director Comey to do, because I was saying this earlier in the show, if he had this information and he waited until after the election in order not to create all this controversy, and then it later came to light that he waited, he'd be accused at that time of trying to be political about it and trying to influence the election in the other way. And really, it's a lose-lose situation in a certain sense, because there's always going to be someone who's not happy, but he really owes the American people the justice in the investigation, putting politics aside.
Well, I mean, he has a responsibility to be objective in his role. That's for sure. And I think that if he actually had an announcement, as opposed to the announcement that we're looking, but we're not going to say one way or the other, then I think people will be a little bit more comfortable with the approach that he took. I think he's just created more questions than answers, and I think that's kind of where it gets a little bit hairy.
Right, and I guess there's one woman who could give us the answers that we all want to know at this point.
And
She
that's
doesn't see.
Abedin.
Yeah, well, maybe two
Because
women then, Huma Abedin and Hillary Clinton. I expect
yeah.
Huma Abedin to take the fall here, but that's a conversation for a different day, Stephanie, because we are out of time. Thank you for being here. Our next tipping point with Scott Rasmussen. Are the polls all tied up? Stick with us. That's straight ahead.